Bring in Daniel Levy. He's the president of the US Middle East Project and a former Israeli negotiator. He joins me now from London. Daniel, the implementation of this forced transfer plan looks to be well underway. There are a few strands here. The destruction of Rafah, leaving a few key buildings, as we saw, the GHF sites forcing people south for food, and then this reported insistence from Israel to keep troops in a military corridor, cutting off essentially the south of the Strip. Is the proposed 60-day ceasefire that's being discussed now, is that also a part of the plan?
It could well be, Nastasia. What you've just shared in terms of this very important satellite evidence of the concentration zones is again exposing in more visible, visceral ways what those who've been paying attention have known for some time and have tried to ignore. And the crucial thing here is that anyone who thought that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was just an exercise in cruelty, in a new level of heaping slaughter on the Palestinians, apparently underestimated what this was about. Because the positioning, as you've just shown, of these GHF distribution sites is a premeditated part of a plan at social demographic engineering to move Palestinians, to relocate, displace and kettle them into this area in the south, previously home to 200,000, as you've said. No way can it accommodate 2 million because that's not the intention. The intention is to use this as a staging post to ethnically cleanse, physically remove more and as many as possible Palestinians from the landscape of Palestine. And of course, that's the continuation of what we've seen for the last 20-odd months. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said, we will rebuild Gaza from nothing in December of 2023 already. We kept hearing Israeli ministers talking about ethnic cleansing. Then they set up a directorate for the transfer. And then Katz started talking about this so-called humanitarian zone. But it goes back much further in history. This is the history of Nakba, of Naksa, and not just for the West Bank. Sorry, not just for Gaza, but for the West Bank as well.
Daniel, how much of this plan that we're seeing, how much of that relies on US complicity, US support?
Well, the entirety of what I think accurately one must call a genocide. We're looking back to Srebrenica, 35 years. We remember Srebrenica, Rwanda, the failures there. This is more than a failure. This is the active complicity. And yes, we're going to talk about what's going on in this particular zone, but let's not forget that throughout these 20 years, more than 57,000 dead. If you're looking at the excess deaths, reports in the Lancet journal, other medical examinations, the number is probably closer to and even beyond 100,000. None of this could have happened without this being not just Israel's war, but America's war, with the enabling and facilitating and at least complicity of much of the rest of the West as well. People like the Spanish Prime Minister stand out in having taken a different line. But the question right now, which I think you're driving us towards, Nastasia, correctly, is how much will we see this feature in the current talks? Netanyahu left D.C. He managed to get away from D.C. without being pinned down on a ceasefire. But it seems that one of the key questions in these talks is whether Netanyahu, with American support, can hold on to this idea of this small zone, this concentration zone, being the place where Palestinians are kettled into as a stepping stone for the further brutalization, dehumanization, and removal of these Palestinians from Gaza. That is one of the major stumbling blocks because Netanyahu doesn't want to let go of this. I would add that I don't think realistically, practically, it's something that they can pull off. But we should be looking at the intentionality and challenging that and holding them to account.
And it would have huge, huge regional implications. Netanyahu is also having to contend with domestic political considerations at home, right? We know, as you say, from statements that the mass displacement of Palestinians has been a long-held ideological aim. But would this plan also potentially then appease the far right and tick that box for Netanyahu too?
So you mentioned two things. Domestically, Netanyahu feels he has more wiggle room after the Iran war, having already shown in January that you can agree to a ceasefire, collapse a ceasefire, and then go in and impose an even more brutal starvation siege. So yes, he will hope that things that he can tell his coalition allies of what will happen in that zone and of the things they can do in the West Bank, East Jerusalem and elsewhere will appease them if he has to agree to 60 days. And then you mentioned those regional implications, and it's really important not to lose sight of that. You know, people have been arguing, Netanyahu has been arguing for decades, if we deal with Iran, we open a whole new vista for a peaceful region. Okay, you had your war with Iran, you got the Americans to bomb Iran, but now what people are being exposed to is that the destabilizing, radicalizing, revisionist state in the region that most threatens regional stability, but also just the ability of people to go about their daily lives without seeing these horrible massacres and without their own countries being threatened, is Israel. And so I think countries in the region are saying, what do we do to rein in the actions of Israel? And if they did try and push people to Egypt or to Jordan, I think this would further bring about a regional inability to digest and deal with a Zionism that is ever more expansionist.
Daniel Levy there, the president of the US Middle East Project. Great to get your thoughts again on Al Jazeera. Thank you for joining me, Daniel.
Thank you, Nastasia.